Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. I'm dealing with a very important book this morning for anyone involved in family law, as I am. This book comes to us from Family Law, which is an imprint of Jordan Publishing in Bristol. The book is Costs in Family Proceedings, now in a third edition by Francis Wilkinson and Dr. Sarah Hunton. Now, my wife Elizabeth and I talked about this book, bearing in mind the issues we faced in our practice at the bar, and we've given it the title, An Indispensable Guide to Costs and Funding in All Family Proceedings, and that's what this book is. Let's look at it first of all. It's absolutely fundamental if you're involved with family matters at the moment because of what is happening. There are some nice cartoons, which I shall come on to in a minute. There's a cartoon at the front, it's the front page. Then you've got the actual spine there, which gives you the title. Then you've got a certain amount of information on the back, not very much. This is available as an e-book, which is mentioned. There's a little symbol there as well, which is useful to know about. I'm not over keen on e-books myself, but again, it's useful to know about. There is the index, which again you will find things quite easily. The index is actually dealing with paragraph numbering. Now after that you've got a lot of information. This one, court fees for family proceedings, very important. Word of warning though, right at the beginning, with whatever you've got in these books, do make sure that the actual figures quoted are current. Because I have this all the time with the Green Book, with any of the stuff that we have, you've got to be up to date. And the likelihood is when you're talking to lawyers or judges that they don't know either what the figures are. And the civil servants likewise, so you've got to be on top of the subject matter. Generally I found the judges to be pretty good though on that. There's the front page there, and then there's a foreword by Lord Wilson, who is a justice of the UK Supreme Court. Well worth reading, very important foreword, dated the 9th of October 2015. Then we've got the actual fairly detailed contents sections of the books. You can see them there as I run through it. There, a lot of proportionality mentioned on a regular basis. There are a total, of course, of 9 chapters, and then some 3 appendices which are listed there. And then you've got the tables of cases involving costs. Then after that you have statutes, of course, and then you've got the SIs there, and then after that you've got quite a useful little, just a short one, abbreviation list, which again is quite useful. We do abbreviate a lot of things. Then there's an introduction by the 2 authors, which sets out what is actually the book's about. A Cinderella subject is one that is undeservedly neglected or ignored, and one that unexpectedly achieves recognition or success after a period of obscurity and neglect. Costs in family proceedings fit both these definitions. Well, there you have it. And I think anybody involved in it will know exactly how we feel. Now, here we go. This is one of a number of cartoons. I'm not going to go through many of them, but I really rather like that. FPR and CPR, out and out. You notice the problems. Family proceedings, definition and powers. And in fact, it goes through, I think this book, I have to say, I think this book is very helpful for people who are going to be litigants in person as well. Because in this day and age, an awful lot of people are. For instance, non-party funding and the liabilities of non-parties. There we go. You've got, what you have here, just to give you an example, is you have the paragraph numbering at the side there, which links into the index at the back. And you've also got the extremely useful footnoting dealing with much more detail concerning the case law references and so forth. And then we get into, for instance, in this chapter 8, assessment of costs. Chapter 7 deals with public funding. I'm not going to say any more than that. And then you've got actually a rather nice cartoon there, which is what we've got on the front. Now, I don't want to trivialise this because it's an important area, and one might think I'm having a little laugh. I'm not at all with costs, and I say that purely out of sadness for the way in which the whole system has generally tended to go in recent years. But what my wife and I have discussed about this book and some of the cases that I've had to deal with and some of the problems that we've had with costs is to try to get some idea of where we are at the moment in the early part of 2016. The book was published at the end of 2015 and I'm reviewing this on the 1st of February. Now this is what we say anyway. It's extraordinary, writes Lord Wilson in his foreword to this book, that until now there's been no authoritative text on costs in the specific context of family proceedings. That's what we've now got. So much to the relief, we would assume, of family practitioners everywhere, this hitherto awkward situation has been rectified with a recent publication of this new title from Family Law imprint of Jordan Publishing. Now, I know it's now in a 3rd edition, but we're talking in terms of relatively short numbers of years for the editions. Now, Lord Wilson also points out that this is a book that no family lawyer or cost draftsman can afford to be without, and I absolutely agree. You've got to know of its existence and know the contents, because you will find very, very quickly, rather than using the red book or all the other information you might have, that you'll find what you need in here. It's also to be commended, Wilson says, for use by family judges, adding that the costs are the one and the only feature that crop up to a greater or lesser extent in every type of family proceedings. Just dealing with some at the moment, and I'm well aware of the costs issue, which tends to be ignored by the client. And with my last conference, I had to just bring the subject back to how much it was all costing, because when I referred to public funding of these cases, one of the cases I'm having is one of a number. They were legally aided initially, and that's gone. And they're now funding it themselves, and they're noticing how much it actually costs. So that is the subject matter, which I do think is, because it's getting very, very pertinent to their own family budgets. You then can see what the effect that can have on their views about whether they should pursue their claims or how they might go about their business in future. So do bear all of that in mind. As I say, it's a feature that does crop up to a greater or lesser extent costs in every family proceeding. And curiously, in view of the author's affirmation that the ordinarily little time is actually spent in family proceedings on costs issue, that is a point that is made. But the trouble is, the costs issue is very, very important. That's where the balance comes in. But then, perhaps it's not surprising after all that costs in family proceedings have not rated their own separate volume until now. And with family proceedings being variously sensitive, delicate, complicated, contradictory and contentious, the matter of costs imposes an additional element of concern, not to mention genuine angst, which explains why, unlike any other legal text now available that we know of, this one is enlivened throughout by cartoons, thank goodness, and very apt and amusing ones they are too, as well as tellingly illustrative, chapter by chapter, of the important points that are being made. And as I said, don't treat that as being frivolous, because it isn't, but it's certainly a bit of an attention seeker, and I think it helps with the flow of the book. The cartoon, for instance, on the cover, which also introduces chapter 8 on assessment of costs, which I showed you, depicts two bewigged barristers. It's a bit of a joke, as we don't wear wigs anymore on that, presenting their cost estimates in front of a bemused judge. The sober-looking one has an estimated costs around £800. The other, with the Cheshire Cat grin, presents costs of over £80,000. An exaggeration? Well, not necessarily. Let's just have a look at it again. There we go. See what we are referring to in our review on that. It's to be expected then that practitioners and judges alike will welcome the 3 appendices in the book, which feature not only the necessary forms but some very handy tables summarising typical and generally reasonable costs pertaining to solicitors and counsel's fees, as well as court fees in family proceedings. And as I said before, I repeat it, do keep an eye on the costs of the court fees, because they have changed and you've got to have the current figures. These, of course, are suggested figures, of course, as I've mentioned, subject to adjustment depending on the circumstances of each case. Let me conclude by saying I think what the two authors have come up with here is a really good book. So whatever the cost issues you can think of, they have dealt with it. Fortunately, and that's why I said it's useful for the unrepresented party, the litigant in person, the book's easy to use with numbered paragraphs throughout, copious footnoting, a detailed table of contents, and extensive tables of cases, statutes and statutory instruments. And the amount of research that has gone into this book on every aspect of costs will undoubtedly impress busy family lawyers who will be pleased that it's also available as an e-book. And the publication date is stated as at Halloween in 2015. Now, having said that, at the end of the year, basically, end of October, there's the book again, and there's the actual spine. You can see there, and then you've got the basic information on the back. I think it's a very, very good book. We went into assessment of costs earlier. Let me just go a little bit further along. Let me show you the various appendices, because they are quite helpful. They are right at the back. What you do have is you have the civil procedure rules set out in terms of you've got the family procedure rules there, and then the civil procedure rules thereafter, which are quite helpful. You've also got Legal Aid Sentencing and Punishment of Offenders Act, LASPO, which is also there. And you've got costs of enforcing orders and enforcement of costs orders. Again, an area that is quite often missed when you're dealing with these matters, because one assumes people will pay and they don't. And that's where the problem is. I'd like to thank the two authors, let's get their names correct, Francis Wilkinson and Dr. Sarah Hunton. I'd like to thank you very much indeed for producing this. We do require, as practitioners, to have, excuse me, we do require this sort of publication to make our lives a bit easier, and they've certainly done so with this. So thank you all very much indeed. A big thank you to Jordan's and the Family Law Imprint again, leading authorities in this area. I think that's a thank you from the judiciary, from the practitioners and from everybody, because actually it's always difficult dealing with these cases, and I think this makes it a bit easier for all of us. Good luck with your cases anyway. Bye bye.